Hi, everybody. Adele Mclean with Holden Advisors, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what we've learned at Holden Advisors as part of changing to virtual delivery. So I want to talk a little bit today about commercial success and sales capability development and why we really can't wait for travel to start again or for the market to rebound, because we need to be focusing on our commercial teams. Now, let me just set it up just really briefly, what we do at Holden Advisors. So we recognize, Dr. Holden recognized a while ago, that organizations often negotiate on an unlevel playing field. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. As you can see here, powerful and aggressive and sophisticated buyers, procurement personnel are trained 40 hours a quarter. Salespeople don't get as much help, or commercial teams. And there's all kinds of internal discount negotiations too. If you've all been in big corporations, I'm sure you can appreciate that. So to combat all that and to help our sellers and our commercial teams, we created Negotiating with Backbone workshop that came from the book that Dr. Holden wrote after he wrote Pricing with Confidence. And so with the framework, he realized that the only way that an organization could realize better pricing was actually to create a framework for everybody to speak a common language. And we give people practical advice in workshops and help them have fun again when they're selling. So a while back, we were fortuitous enough to have taken a 2-day workshop, which is very, very intensive, and create a blended learning program. And so looking back on that now, I feel how lucky we are at Holden Advisors to have made that move. And so as part of blended learning, we created a digital pre-work set of modules to take people kind of through the basics of the framework, basics of basics, Backbone, and do a lot of the pre-work that we would normally do in a lecture environment. So that was already done before COVID hit us. So we wanted to be able to hit a bigger part of the organization as well, not just sellers, and we could do that through basics. So I'm sure most of you were feeling in February and March, I was traveling, I'd just gotten back home, and I'm sure most of you were having this feeling that there was something on the horizon. And I was thinking through my own feelings at the time, and I really wasn't able to process, fully understand the ramifications of the storm that was brewing. So first, I thought about the daily essentials of living. And then all of a sudden, I realized that our work was highly dependent on clients who have insisted for years for in-person training. And they have their reasons for it. There's a lot of teamwork that happens in our workshops. There's a lot of behavior change that happens. So it's rightfully so they might insist on in-person. So then I felt like this, and I felt, oh, what are we gonna do? My reaction was, oh goodness, what will become of our current engagements? We had things on the book. And thankfully, as a team, our small team, we have experience working virtually. We're all spread out all over the United States. And we do most of our pricing consulting work virtually, because most companies have people in a lot of different locations, and it's not easy to assemble people these days in one spot in one time. So we quickly took a creative moment of, what could we do with our Backbone program, which has traditionally been at least some part in person. And we moved from, oh my, what are we gonna do, to let's get it done. And I think that's a testament to a working team that was fairly flexible in how they think about the virtual work environment anyway. Then the next reaction was, how do we move this big elephant onto a plane that's getting ready to take off? And that was probably end of February, 1st of March. And that was a little scary to think about the big effort to actually get this done. And it was a big elephant that we had to address and push through that plane so that plane could take off. Because we realized that for a long time, we weren't gonna have this environment of people being together like this. And I think it's gonna be even a longer time before we see in-person training coming back, even beyond this year. So one of the things, this graphic we use in Negotiating with Backbone, and it's to depict a seller up against a procurement person or an executive who's using procurement tactics on you. And I pulled it out of our Backbone deck today because I felt like this. Like there's this huge task that we had to undertake to convert all this good stuff that we had for Backbone. And it was kind of daunting. And you have to get over the fear of it first, because we know in the end, what we want to create for our sellers is some superpowers to protect pricing and margin for their companies. So, we had to do some soul searching to maybe take a risk and a leap of faith because we never had experience doing the whole thing virtually. Thank goodness for basics. So the other thing that we know about this time is it's going to be tough for sellers and it's going to be tough for profits. And one of the things that negotiating with Backbone does is help companies stop internal negotiations and really work together with a different level of understanding about what's actually going on with the customer. You know, what is their buyer type and what do they really value and how can we monetize that value? So we know with people working remote that it's going to be much harder to everybody get on the same page. And so it's pretty much an imperative to have a common language and framework, because what we don't want to see happen, you know, as we move through the rest of this year and into 2021 and 2022 is burning up profits and burning up dollars just because we're, you know, up against a really tough buyer who's going to demand discounts because of the market and because of the way things are happening. And instead, we'd like to have, you know, money kind of rain down on us in this virtual world. And I love this guy sitting here. He's on his computer, he's alone, he's at his house, and he's able to still do the things he needs to do in his work environment to make money and make profits. So we did it. So we took a one-day application workshop, and it's usually an 8-hour day for folks. We start at 8:30 and go to 5. And we cut it into pieces so that we could captivate audiences virtually, like we do when we're with them in person. And we added some things to it. So, and we changed some things. So typically we have a 30-person workshop in person, and we said, nope, can't handle more than 20. We went from table team sizes of 6 in the in-person to 5 in virtual, because we felt like the coaches needed to handhold a little bit more. We have them complete their basics, and we set off on it. We did 2 2.5-hour webinars, so a total of 5 hours together as a group with a lot of interactions. And then we did 2 1-hour virtual table team sessions as we started. So we would do Monday, Wednesday with the group seminar, we'll call it, and Tuesday, Thursday with individual table teams. We have since changed that, and I'll talk a little bit about evolving as you go through this, as you learn new things. We have since changed that to having the whole group together and using breakout sessions in WebEx. So we get a little bit more sharing from the table teams back into the whole group when we do it that way on the Tuesday, Thursdays versus having each coach and each table team go separate. So we have homework, which we don't have in the in-person, which I think is going really well, and it reinforces everything that's learned during the day. And then we have had an improving practice plan for years, but we've incorporated it with the homework so that it's kind of like, what are you going to do with the assignment with your new thinking, and then what are you going to do for your own opportunity and your own behaviors as part of it as well. So it's all together. So what did we learn as we went through this transition? This is a big transition for a small company. Well, we learned a ton of stuff, and it wasn't all just about how to deliver virtually. We learned a lot about the human element, and I'm feeling after doing this a couple of months, we're still learning about the human element of this virtual world, and I'm sure we'll probably make more adjustments as we go. So let me start with effective training. Like, what did we learn about effective training? Well, the first thing is we have to have much less lecture and a lot more interactivity. And it's got to be like super fast paced, and the learners have to have their hands on the wheel, not doing multitasking. So it's up to facilitators to figure out how to make that happen. And we want them to focus on the screen and the content. And I was actually super worried going out, even with 2.5 hours of webinar. You know, it seems like that's like fingernails on a chalkboard when you think about that much time. But in the end, most of the feedback we've gotten is they didn't know where the time went because it was so interactive, and it takes a lot of effort to get that done. We also created a pre-workshop competition to make sure that everybody did their basics, their digital pre-work and digital module pre-work. And we had actually talked about that as a team before we went to totally virtual, because we do want people to pay attention to the work they're doing as they come into the class. And so there are 2 elements, the Backbone basics, and then they also have an assignment to bring their own deal and work up an opportunity qualifier. So we gave points out in advance, and people are super competitive. So if you're doing stuff virtually, competition might not be a bad thing. We used every little bit of WebEx's functionality to keep our participants engaged. We used polls green check, red X, pointer tools, smiley faces. They have texting tools. They have breakout sessions. So figure out how to use it all, because it keeps it kind of exciting, because the learners are actually learning all these new things as well on WebEx, because many of them haven't done that yet. So gamification is super important in any workshop, but it's way much more important in the virtual world. So I think that was a good thing for us. We really pushed ourselves to actually create more activities, and also pushed ourselves to use every type of gamification feature that was out there. We also learned, that the things we convey in person, and I'm sure most of you would know this intuitively, it takes a far more repetitions virtually. And, you know, I think we all get bombarded by email and phone calls or text. But when we're trying to communicate what to prepare for in the virtual space, we had to go through far more repetitions. And we had to tweak our communications quite a bit and use and revisit the same topics many times related to, please join WebEx with a headset or a USB mic, or, you know, not just your onboard mic, how to log in to WebEx. We repeat the things you would think would be simple. And I think the other thing is that we had to use different ways to communicate. So not just short, crisp emails, but I did videos. And I think people invest in watching a few 30-second video and then probably go back and read the email. So I've even toyed with using audio only, like just a little audio soundbite, not even with a video. So some things to consider as you're trying to communicate with people who are overwhelmed by, you know, honestly, about what's going on in the world, the COVID and the protests, but, you know, just how to get their attention. And we started putting graphics in our emails too, that were kind of catchy, you know, cute little things. And I found just last week that when I send the end of day workshop or homework assignments, I started to use little icons in the subject line, and then everybody read it. Like I just used the suits of a card deck, since this is negotiating with Backbone and we talk about being at a poker table. And people seem to react to those because there's something different in your inbox. It looks a little different. So the other thing is we've always had coaches, and they're there to poll the team and to talk to the team about the new concepts, and really to kind of pull out everyone's thinking, because there is a lot of behavior change. And this time we had to do it much different. And I was reflecting on maybe why. And I've come to the conclusion that in a typical workshop where people are comfortable being in front of each other, there was a new element of technology that they hadn't used WebEx before. There was a new element that they hadn't done virtual training before. And so the coaches actually were a little more worried about their role in the virtual environment than we had noticed before. So we learned from them as we went about things we could do to make them feel more comfortable. So I think the conclusion is there's a bit more hand-holding than you might think when people are making any change. And for those of us who've been working in the virtual environment, we might not recognize that all the time. And I will say about our coaches, the last thing, we have learned a ton from them and been able to adjust and make things clearer, simpler, teeing up in the session what we want them to do, X, Y, and Z, even though they've already been ramped in the coaches webinar, we say it again. So I think it's that repetition and clarity that people are looking for. And on top of all this, and Jill, I'm sure Jill's gonna be on my case because this isn't the best ergonomic position, but what I learned is about the technology part of it. And this isn't even my full setup. At the moment, I have a huge monitor that you really need to have to be able to see on the screen and manage all your participants. Redundancy is a big thing. I have 2 laptops that are always plugged in directly into my router with the Ethernet cord. I'm not relying on Wi-Fi. Haven't had a problem yet with my internet, but last Monday, my good computer decided it needed to run some major update right before the session. And so thank goodness that, you know, these smart people who've been doing this work for a long time have told me you need to have 2 computers running. I learned all of this from a wonderful producer named Heather Aguilar here in the United States, if anybody needs producers. And part of that, we had Heather train some other members of our team to produce this content going forward, because it's so interactive with the gamification that the facilitator couldn't possibly manage it on their own. So it was an investment, you know, that I didn't think of going into the virtual space. It's been noticed by our clients, and I'll just kind of read some of the things that one of the senior VPs of sales at our last week's session said. It has been noticed by our clients that we have a best practice by having a producer, and he felt it was brilliant that the facilitator could just focus on the participants while the producer was working in the background, making sure people were okay, getting the files they needed. We had a lot of connectivity issues with a certain client for their network reason, getting them back on board. And then, you know, along with having the participants join 15 minutes early on our lecture days, just to get everybody settled so we're not wasting a bunch of time as we're trying to get into the content. So a lot of learnings there. And, you know, I asked my husband if he took another picture. You'll see the Ethernet cords everywhere running through my office, the big screen, the big monitors back where you see that. And I finally, after years of knowing I should have done it, I got a VariDesk, and, you know, it actually has changed my life. My back feels better. So it does work. And then what did we learn that we didn't anticipate? So we talked a little bit about the human factor of it. I learned a lot about the technical aspect of delivery and the things you have to do differently, but I was kind of surprised on some of the human aspects. And I'm just gonna have to read a few of these to you. So as we went along the path of creating virtual negotiating with Backbone, we were reading a ton. I mean, we were reading from all the experts about virtual delivery, really reading other consultancies about, you know, what they were thinking in this new environment. And one article in particular caught the attention, our eye, and I'll read a few points of it to you. It's a McKinsey article. It's adapting workplace learning in the time of coronavirus. And the premise is that businesses cannot afford to put capability building on hold. And I, of course, kind of understand that intuitively. And they talk about 6 best practices for people who are having to move their learning platforms to digital. And I'll just read them. So you have intermediate and kind of tactical and strategic things that you all have to be thinking about to maintain kind of the benefit of workplace learning in the time when we're not able to get together. So some of them are establishing a learning response team, protecting employees if you do in-person programs, though we don't have any in-person on our books right now, though one client out in Colorado hopes to do that in Q3. Adapting your delivery, which I've kind of talked about, promoting digital learning, which some of our clients who said they would never use our basics are now in love with it. Exploring alternative digital strategy and practicing and preparing for multiple outcomes. So I think it's kind of part of the think about what could go well and what might not go so well, and what do we do about that. So I think the other thing that caught my attention from that article was about some benefits. And the benefits of virtual training is that it increases a sense of community and purpose and focus for people who are no longer connecting with their colleagues. And I'm an extreme extrovert, so I get that. So I've been loving the virtual stuff. And when you're not with your colleagues anymore, you feel a little lost. So virtual training can actually have that benefit of just, you know, boosting that teamwork. So, you know, around the world, organizations are using digital learning even to increase collaboration. And, you know, they're working across time zones and from remote locations, which we have done before, but it's usually teleconference. It's not really learning things, and definitely not to make behavior change. It's kind of tough. So I think these are good arguments for putting even additional emphasis maybe on, you know, moving companies from that space of traditional classroom to virtual. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the folks that are in our client population had never done it before, and they really liked it once they did it. So we got to get over the hump of being skeptical about what we can learn online versus in person. And, you know, to toot our horn just a little bit, and also just to share direct from for participants what they got out of it. And this was from the first one we ever delivered. They loved the interaction. They felt that they were able to work with their team better than they had been since the shutdowns and the travel restrictions. And you can see one comment here, first time I'm doing a virtual training class. So this group had people who'd never even experienced it before. And I think the thing that was really important to me is a lot of people said out loud, oh my gosh, where did the time go? So I think it's really key as you move your work into the virtual platform that you keep it fast paced and on point. And I think, you know, good graphics help too. You can see I'm a graphics queen here. All right, so the other thing that we have to help people understand is, while they're at home, is that we want to make sure we can connect kind of that capability building with our long-term goals. And so a lot of companies now are going through, you know, immense change and profit pressures, and procurement guys are going to come after everybody with, you know, the demand for more discounting. So I think we got to link together why we're doing this. I mean, we have learning plans already, but we're doing it probably with more emphasis on the fact that we're going to survive this and come out of this in a better way, perhaps, and at the same time protect our margins now. And so for us at Holden, you know, that's a big thing for us, to connect what we're doing skill-wise with the results of the business. And I think every learning partner would say that, but we can actually measure, you know, kind of pricing outcomes. So we're super pleased that we're able to pivot really quickly and to be able to support our clients to have better pricing and profit outcomes. It's been really great. And the last thing that I was thinking about in this virtual environment is coaching. And part of our program asks coaches post-workshop to meet with their teams 30, 60, and 90 days, or the right cadence for your sales pipeline. And what I've noticed over the course of the last couple of months is we need coaches to actually check in more. And we've suggested that coaches even meet with their participants the week after the training, because it is so fast-paced, there's a lot coming at them, to continue doing their role plays, like practice again, to continue talking about the framework and using the tools that we give them, so that we reinforce that behavior where it becomes natural. So that's the ultimate outcome of any training, is that you learn something new, put it into practice, and then it becomes a behavior. So I think making time for coaching, because you're not going to get that random hallway chit chat to coach somebody through things in this virtual world, and making it intentional and putting it on your calendar would probably be the best thing. So a few months into this new program, I took the time to reflect, and this graphic came up from our executive forum last October, and the subject of that executive forum was transformation. But as I went through thinking about be better than you were yesterday, the point of that for transformation work is that you continuously improve, and you create a culture of continuous improvement. And I think it's real easy when there's so much uncertainty in the world to not make a move. And, you know, we have a culture of creating perfect products. And I know people say you can't create a perfect product, but that's our ideal. That's what we're going for, perfection. But I can tell you what we did out the gate was really, really great. And a lot of things that maybe participants wouldn't even notice, but we would come together after we delivered and critique. And then we asked feedback from the coaching group every cycle to make sure we're continuing to update our approach and our process. And then I think we have to be comfortable with a little bit of failure. I mean, you don't want to go out the gate with a complete failure, but I was really not good my first time out, because there was so much going on the screen and trying to manage participants and, you know, really understand the technology. I wasn't that good, though we still got good results from our participants. So I think, you know, be better than you were yesterday. And then finally, I'm going to leave you. This is one of my favorite graphics of all time. And if any of my former colleagues are watching, you probably recognize it, because I use it a lot, because it says so much. And this fishbowl that we're in as a global community has changed, and we have to adapt. We have to take risk. And you can see he's prepared. He's got a suitcase and he's got his bubble on there. And at the same time, taking a leap of faith. You know, you see the two little fish that are stunned that he's left. You've got another fish who's taken a leap of faith. And I think that's what I'd like to leave you with. And I've learned so much over the course of 3 months. And I tell people a lot, won't tell you how old I am, but I tell people a lot, I feel like my brain is pretty malleable, but all of this coming on at once, I was exhausted from the process of not just the what was going on in the world, but the technology side of it and learning to interact with people in a new way. It was a big brain stretch for me. So take some time to recover from that as well. But in the end, it's working well, and I'm happy to help anyone out there who's trying to transition training materials or a workshop into the virtual space, because it can be done. It can be done really well, and it does take a lot of effort. So Till another time, thank you for listening, and feel free to reach out at amclean@holdenadvisors.com. And I'd like to give a shout out to my really great friend Caroline for allowing me to be included, and to Jill as well for putting on this Workarama. I think it's a brilliant idea, and we only get better by sharing what we know and learning from others. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Okay, till later. Bye-bye.